Exciting times. Thank you, everyone, for your patience while we dealt with some technical difficulty. It would not be, year 3 of living in a virtual world if we still did not hit some bumps and bruises along the way. So appreciate your patience. We're going to dive right in. We have a ton to cover. My name is Kendra Cato. I am the Director of Enterprise Strategy with Bullhorn. We are the largest global software provider for staffing and recruiting across the globe. And I am super, super excited to introduce today's panelists. Amy, please, would you go first?
Yes, and thank you for your patience. It was me with the technology.
Oh, united front up here.
I know, and I'd hate to say yes after almost 3 years, still haven't got it right. I'm the Vice President of Operational Strategy at CHG Healthcare. I've been there about 8 years. I've been in the staffing probably the last 15, and before that, about 10 to 11 years in the hospitals working. So excited to be here. Some of my new direction has been on technology and how does it help move our business forward. I come up through recruitment and operations, so this is a new area for me to help focus on.
Hey everybody, I'm Lauren Sturth. I'm a president over here at Insight Global. Most people call me Larry. We're about a $4 billion staffing company in North America. We work across a wide array of industries such as technology, business, finance, engineering, healthcare, government services. We'll place about 80,000 candidates this year, and my organization has about 1,500 recruiters in it. Really appreciate the partnership with Bullhorn. Really excited to be here to talk about how we're leveraging technology to be able to help make all those matches that all the customers need right now. So, Kendra, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you again, both of you, for joining today. I wanted to just kind of do a little bit of level setting because late last year we held our first grid survey that's focused primarily on candidate and worker needs versus staffing pros. And so we had surveyed over 2,000 North American and UK workers, and we came away with 3 key things that I thought would be provide some great context for today's discussion. One of them being, now is the time to leverage digital transformation in the candidate experience. 2, candidates really like working with recruiters, but they want them to meet them on their terms. And 3, don't sleep on the value of human touch, which none of us are surprised about there, especially these days. Now, an interesting point was that although 3 out of 5 freelance workers would rather work with recruiters, a whopping 90% said that they wished it were easier to do so, and that the process with working with staffing firms was more streamlined. So they love it. They love what we do. They love recruiters and working with staffing firms, but 90% are saying, God, you guys, you could really be doing a better job at this and making it easier for us. So it seems like candidates are ready for change, and some firms are stepping up to that. And so it's time for us to meet the moment. Larry, I'd love to ask you, what has been the catalyst for Insight Global and your leadership team and thinking that the industry is ready and poised for disruption?
Yeah, well, I think that we're just now, obviously, COVID changed a lot, but what COVID really did was, even in this recovery period where hiring is coming back to such a great extent, there's so many more jobs than there are workers right now. We do feel like we're right back in this low unemployment space that we were in pre-recession. And I remember pre-COVID, you really started getting into this vernacular around how, the candidate is the customer. The candidate has to be the one that knows that you as the recruiter have their best interests in mind. When you start working with great candidates, you better be prepared to submit them to 3, 4, 5 different positions. You better give them optionality. And a lot of that verbiage was stuff that was, reserved for customers prior to COVID. And then all of a sudden COVID hits and, unemployment goes down and it feels like everybody's looking for work. But now we blink and 18 months later, 2 years later, now we're back again. And we're in that same scenario where the candidate really is the customer. I know, Amy, especially for you in healthcare and in nursing, in our healthcare practice, that's always been a very, very common phrase. But now we're seeing it across a wide range of industries. Obviously, remote work has really, really played a heavy factor into that because now every candidate actually does have the optionality at their fingertips. It doesn't take a recruiter to connect them to opportunity because their job search is nationwide. And so I think that the role of the recruiter in that has to be advisor, facilitator. You have to make that process easy. You have to instill trust, and usually that comes through transparency. And so much of that has come from just the fact that yet again, even after going through a recession, just a short, 18 months ago, we're back in a very competitive candidates market.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's been that way for the better half of the last decade.
Yeah, agreed. You brought up a good point, Larry. We have, customers coming to us on our end who have just in the last few years launched their healthcare business. And to say, Amy, you were ahead of the curve, right? Your candidates have always been your customers, and you've known that they needed to be treated differently, if you will. And so having folks, firms that are just now getting into this arm of the business, they're realizing they can't just copy paste what they were doing and how they were managing candidates. So what other ways on your side of the business have you seen things change?
And I think, you hit it. We saw a little bit different, on the nursing segment, it didn't slow down. It actually skyrocketed. So it was, how do you provide that experience with the volume that was coming in? On our other side of the business, it did slow down, like most of what we saw. I think the hard thing with healthcare is balancing all the needed paperwork. Unfortunately, there's a whole lot of it in healthcare. And so that's always a hurdle. You have to figure out how to make it easy and intuitive. Folks don't want to talk to you. You still have to have recruiters. You still have to have that human touch that's meaningful. They want to get on at all kinds of hours. Again, they're healthcare. They're working at night. They're working early mornings. We play phone tag with them. It's how do you make a system that's intuitive, easy to use for them to walk through, and even complete the hardest stuff. Again, healthcare requires a little bit more paperwork. And so again, how do you make it easy for them, but sticky? So if it's in one spot, it's harder for them to go to other agencies. So even if you have a lot of jobs, it doesn't matter really at this time. It's about your recruiter and about the ease of working with us right now and onboarding. Because unfortunately in healthcare, a lot of us have a lot of jobs right now. So that's not, and we have a lot of great candidates, but you can't keep them if it's hard to work with us.
You brought up a great point. They want to talk to recruiters, but not when it's time to fill out paperwork and make sure certifications are set. They just want that in a bucket somewhere, and when everyone's able to pull from it as needed. Okay.
So, I mean, the recruiters, that's not their area either. Like, I don't want to be administrative. So how do you make it easy on the candidate and easy on the recruitment team?
Yeah, that makes sense. So paperwork aside, how is your business using technology to improve the candidate experience? Larry, you want to take this first?
Sure. Go ahead. I'll go ahead. Yeah, and you bring up such a great point. I actually love learning from all of the things that our healthcare practice is doing, and even the partners that we've met in this new industry, because I feel like what you said, Amy, that industry is so far ahead of the candidate experience as it pertains to things like onboarding. And in paperwork, it's very similar in places like government services, or if you're working in highly regulated sectors, even if you're placing a software engineer with a major bank in the investments division, it's a pretty heavy lift. And so there's a lot of innovation that's happened on the healthcare front that I think is wonderful to bring into contingent staffing everywhere. What's really important though right now is the matching process, in my experience, because every great candidate that is open to remote work is now open to 100x the job opportunities that they had beforehand. It can be really overwhelming for a candidate. And so what they look for is an agency or a company that they can partner with as a recruiter, where you have technology-enabled recruiting, technology-enabled job selection. So where we're really moving forward is with the opportunity for the introduction of things like machine learning in the candidate matching process. Hey, if I have a candidate that applied for a job through one of our inbound channels, like a LinkedIn or an Indeed, how can I make sure that I have a tool that allows my recruiter to immediately match that candidate to the best 5 jobs that we have available? They don't have time to go over 50. But now they're eligible for 500. So how do you use technology to be able to make sure that those are the best 5 conversations, and if you're submitting them to 5 places, that they're going to get one of those roles? I think that's a really, really big element of it. I think the other big element of it is, just like any industry where now the customer, which in our minds obviously is the candidate for this discussion, and if you're taking a look at your customer, if there's a lot of options, if there's a lot of inventory, the number one way that you can increase efficiency is by putting that into your customer's hands. So for the candidates, like making sure that you have really easy searchable interfaces for all of the jobs that you have open. For us, it's getting them into trickle and email marketing campaigns that actually hit them with jobs that they're a match for, even when they're currently submitted to one job or another, or being able to troll through your alumni network with those same pertinent jobs. If you can use that same technology that your recruiters use to match the candidates to the roles, and then you empower your candidates with it, what happens is more often than not, they're going to find the job that they're the best fit for. Just like nurses. A nurse in a major city is going to know what hospital they really want to go work at, and then you become more of a broker of that transaction than anything else. So those are a few places that we can use technology to really help just enhance the candidate experience, which right now is what it's all about.
Yeah. Oh, Larry, you don't have to hit mute. Here's sales folks in the background excited about it. That's why we're all here, right? So, Amy, I know you mentioned again that the ability to apply, search, and complete paperwork, but what are some other critical elements of your candidate's employment that technology helps with?
Yeah, and I think, Larry, you touched, I mean, again, when you have so many jobs, it's a bit overwhelming to kind of search what you're looking through from again, healthcare sector right now. But I would say a couple of years ago, our focus was client. Like, that has to be the priority. Let's, bring technology to them. And it quickly shifted maybe a year and a half ago. It has to be the candidates. And so the focus has been on creating some type of portal access for them. It's out there, the apps, the portals, all of us trying to create, they're all similar, but it is about one-stop shopping. And that has been the focus this last year and a half, is utilizing some of the bullhorn tools, some of our internal tools to create access for our candidates. So right from the start, how do you create a portal for them where they can apply, come back whenever they want, see the jobs they're matched to, back to kind of Larry's comment of how do you serve up the jobs possibly they were searching on the internet. So they're on our website. How do you start to serve that up, not in a way that freaks them out that we're watching what they're doing, but you're bringing them to the top. There's interest there, but all of that through kind of a one-stop shop again. I think it does become overwhelming in their email box to get the job alerts and the newsletters and fill out this paperwork and do this. And so if you can bring them back to one place, which is really hard to get it in the house, it does improve that customer experience and kind of retention and stickiness with you. And that has been the focus.
Okay, Amy, that leads me to my next question, because when we're thinking automation specifically, right, how are you deciding what parts of your operations, your engagement process you're going to automate? You brought up a few points just now, but is there anything else related to that?
Yeah, I think when we started bringing this on, this was a little new for us, and that's hard in a sales environment, because you start to cross over that you don't need me anymore. I've heard that comment. You need them. You just need them for the really meaningful, like, deal closures and relationship building. And we did start with the candidate side. That had to be the focus. What are some easy things that don't touch on toes much, so you can get the buy-in and get the adoption? Like, you've got to get the buy-in and adoption from them. And so it was taking off some of those easy efficiency gains to say, look, it's not that you're going to make 50 less phone calls. You're actually going to make 50 more, because I took things off your desk, some of that administrative type tools. And that's where we started the focus. And then you start to look at retention. How do you keep them? How do you keep them on your site? By serving up the jobs, serving up the information to them. But I think when you start to dip your foot into automation, to get your team to buy in, it has to be the easy stuff they see the win for. Otherwise, it's looks and feels like automation to them. And it's hard for them to sell that to their candidates.
Sure. No, that makes sense. No, we need them. We certainly do. And, our grid survey talent results said the same thing. They want to work with recruiters. They're excited to work with them. So how can we make it a more meaningful experience for them? Larry, do you have anything to add on how we're...
What I'm really, really excited about too is with all of these additional options, and maybe it's just with our purview, but we're operating at any given time with between 20 and 30,000 different open roles. And so for us, I think to myself, how can I get those roles in automated fashions in front of as many of our potential candidates as possible? But not just with job board automation or programmatic advertising that we're leveraging, but then even the next step, like once you have candidates that apply, how can you do things like being able to automate workflows where your recruiters and account managers can tag screening questions for those applications so that they're only seeing relevant applicants. When those applicants apply, being able to have useful integrations to be able to have ease of scheduling. You'd be shocked at just how important something as simple as scheduling is if you're a candidate and you're working with 5 or 6 different recruiters. The ability to have simple Outlook integration, simple stuff built into LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever ATS you're working with Bullhorn, you're like, that's it. That's a huge game changer for a candidate. Because if it's one thing that I think that this world is really over, it is the back and forth. We have really grown to be an on-demand culture. We're an on-demand culture with how we ingest our movies, with how we order our groceries, with how we schedule our doctor's appointments. The candidates are no different. They want an on-demand ability to be able to talk to their recruiter and go through their jobs that they found on their own.
Makes sense, definitely. And you can order anything from a case of soda or beer or whatever you want to call it these days to getting your car serviced, So
they don't want to play phone tag 4 times to schedule a meeting with you when during that they've already done all their weekly grocery shopping, upgraded their insurance, and done everything else.
100%. So with thinking of on demand, but let's take it a step further. I know, Amy, you just touched on this briefly when mentioning retention. We're currently experiencing this talent shortage. That's no secret. So redeployment has been a huge focus because of that. So what part can technology and or automation play in improving your redeployment rates?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit before the pandemic because right now the redeployment's a little different, just because we're turning through the nursing and the physician side. But it is keeping those jobs in front of them. And I think, it's the way and avenues we offer them. I think as you guys were touching a little bit on how quickly they want to connect and on demand, if you're not offering up a variety, and that means by phone, by text, by some type of Calendly type of appointment type link, through your website, through chat, if you're not offering up multiple avenues to communicate with them and make it easy, you will lose them. They will find the job they're looking for. And not that there's, not easy redeployment in the healthcare sector right now, because all the jobs are out there. So you still have to keep them attracted and keep those, I'm going to say, a week out, how do you connect with them? 2 weeks out, how do you connect with them? The job is coming to a close. Do you want to stay? And that goes for the client as well. How is it going? At the 1 week mark, most of our stuff is 13 weeks or kind of real time, onesie, twosie, like locums. And you have to stand in front of both parties, or again, there's plenty out there and a shortage in healthcare. And so they'll jump ship and go to the next one. What's nice to see during the pandemic, it has been not as much about the job and pay, where that was always it. In healthcare, if you had the job and the pay, it didn't matter how good of a relationship you had and ability to redeploy them. It was the person that had the job. And that is a little bit different now. It is that relationship. And being able to communicate with them and keeping them in touch with our recruiters.
Yeah. Is there any other catalyst for that, Amy? I'm sorry, Mary. I'm curious. Beyond the job and the pay these days, is it the relationship, the location? Is there anything else that is at play?
Again, there's a burnout, and so unfortunately, we're moving from A to B. Well, B is also moving to C because they don't want to be there and they're burned out. So it is location, but there's just so much opportunity right now. I go back to, I think Larry said 25, 30,000. There's 30,000 times 2 or 3 openings in each of those jobs right now. It's just overwhelming. And so it is having to use our technology more today with our candidates to serve up really what they're looking for. I don't want to log in and see 10,000 jobs in California. How do we use that to narrow down what Kendra's looking for? And we just didn't have to do that before. That volume wasn't there for them. And making sure we don't lose them. And so, through this, you grow your candidate pool and client base. At some point, the pandemic is going to ease. At some point, how do you keep that? And that does go back to using our automation and technology to keep that stickiness and relationship with them, or we'll lose them at that time when it turns.
Helpful, thanks. Larry, you had something to add there.
Oh, I was just going to say, I thought that was so well said. In particular, about giving multiple channels for your current consultants or whoever's working for you to be able to get issues in front of your people. It's twofold as it comes to redeployment. It's a heavy technology element because that's what helps you track who's coming up on ending assignment. This is really big in places like our technology sector or engineering sector. Like being able to track that and manage that is really, really important. But being able to use automation to lean in for things like surveys or chat or NPS scoring, being able to leverage sentiment analysis is really important to be able to identify who potential at-risk people are. So you have all of these at-risk, or you have all these technology-enabled things that help you identify who do you need to be working with and who's potentially at risk. But then at Insight Global, we believe that there's a huge leadership development element of this as well. We've embedded, we have a consultant engagement organization. We have a vice president solely over consultant engagement, and she has in her organization over 40 leaders. So these aren't people that are working in a distributed support team somewhere at corporate. These are leaders that are in the offices, actually people that we would consider at our lead recruiter level. And those leaders are the ones that in the offices are working with their teammates, their recruiters, their account managers, the national accounts teams, to be able to identify where the issues are and then be able to drive immediate resolution to it. We feel like that embedding of a leader from our consultant engagement organization who's driving things like our active submittals, who's mitigating negative turnover, who's mitigating our back out or failure to start ratios, that leadership development in each of our offices has been an absolute game changer for us. So part technology, part leadership for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll get many follow-up questions on that one, Larry, because that is that is such an interesting and a first for me personally, hearing of how you're really utilizing this and using it to drive business, but also growth and better understanding within your offices. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so now tech is only part of the story. Selfishly, I believe it's a huge part. But how are you ensuring that these solutions are being adopted across your business? Mary, why don't you take this one first?
Well, if you think about with the model that I just outlined, actually with redeployment and consultant engagement, we replicate that across the board in all areas of our business. I think that if you're in staffing, it's really, really important to have dedicated leadership teams towards whatever you think you need to get better at. For us as a big staffing company, we have a really robust, direct placement and executive search leadership team. We have a robust managed services team, national accounts team. What's really important is that these aren't just strategy leaders, but they're leaders that are in the day-to-day doing the work with the people that are actually either supporting clients or supporting the candidates. And so for us, being able to have a leadership development organization that focuses on things like one of our shared values, leadership is here to serve, that focuses on things like being able to stay really connected to the candidate and the customer. We have over 300 leaders in our organization alone that are actually in candidate or customer facing roles. And so if you think about all of these things, like, how you implement new technology, how you leverage that to be able to drive things like better candidate matching or better redeploy, if you have that leadership development organization at the ground floor and they're leaning into the candidates and the customers, and then you as an executive team are really leaning into what is going on the ground and how are these tools helping you, or do we just need to get other stuff out of your way? It is the critical element to being able to get anything implemented in a large organization, is having a strong leadership organization on the ground. And we've been really blessed to be able to have that. We've got wonderful people here.
Fantastic. Okay. I will be picking your brain myself later. So thank you, Larry. Amy, is there anything you'd like to add on how you're ensuring these solutions are being adopted?
Yeah, I think, Larry hit it. That support from leadership has to be there. And it is the hardest thing. I'm just going to say, it's absolutely, won't lie, it is the hardest thing to get adoption no matter what you roll out, especially if it feels like it's taking a piece of what you do away. But checking in with your teams, did we build it right? Did we make it harder? So even if your customer is your candidate, what I found is you start to build technology, you focus so much on that experience for the customer that, our first year out of the gate was we piled it on the internal folks. And so the adoption wasn't great. And so it is making sure that you balance both of those customers, that they understand why we're doing it. the hardest but the easiest thing to do is communicate. So having that right leadership that supports it, but making sure you're communicating the why. Why are we pushing this technology out? What are we doing? You're painting a vision for them, because if they don't understand it, it's really hard to follow along and adopt it. But it is the hardest thing to roll out, is the adoption of this technology. But again, without a vision, they're just not seeing what the use of it is for. So if you pull in, some of the technology we talked about, the portals, why do I have texting? Why do I have meetings? If you don't paint how those all come together, they'll struggle with adopting it. It's just one more thing you're laying on to them. So I think that's probably the best thing for us in learning lessons. We just started layering on technology and not explaining what the vision looked like, and it was hard to adopt.
Sure. Yeah, making sure there's alignment on vision, and the why is so crucial. So everyone feels that, their decision to participate is not just related to their role today, but their opportunities within the firm and the growth across the business. So makes absolute sense there. One thing, when just talking change management and adoption, Larry, I know you had mentioned this in previous conversations about how, because of remote work these days, it's looking more and more like a national search when you have an open job, and we're hearing this from other large firms as well. How are you going about upskilling or just reframing folks' approach when thinking about it this way, internally and with candidates?
Yeah, I mean, so there's so much that you have to, there's so much that goes into that model when you're creating, because what you're really talking about is, if you've got 1,500 recruiters nationwide, but they're all only working on recs in their current market, and they're coming across all these candidates, but they're not broadening their reach out to other markets that they could get that candidate connected to opportunity, it's going to be really, really hard. And so, for us, I think the first thing that you have to do is you have to really name it. You have to name whatever objective you're trying to achieve if you want to change, and it's got to be simple and clear. For us, we call it the candidate first mentality. Hey, should I submit that candidate to a second customer, even though he's kind of submitted to the one? Yeah, that's the candidate first mentality. You got to do what's in the best interest of the candidate right there, because they need optionality, right? Hey, we've got a candidate who is, 2 months off from finishing up their assignment, but man, they're unhappy. We've got to be able to get them into something new. Is it okay if we start? Yeah, okay, we got to talk with that client, of course, but our hands are tied here because we have the candidate first mentality. We've got to take care of our people. That consultants are part of our family. So for us, you got to name it first. And then if you really want to drive improvement through a space, you've got to find a way that your team likes being measured by it, if that makes sense. So for instance, for us, we've got 75 offices nationwide. We have made it such a point of pride if you're a recruiter and you have placements in 5 or more offices. What does that mean? That means that I'm actually, every time I'm working with a single candidate, I'm broadening my search to the overall market. And that's allowing me to be able to say, okay, throughout a quarter or throughout a year, I'm going to make placements with 20 different account managers and 20 different customers and 5 to 10 different offices. Well, why? Because I have the candidate first mentality. So when I go through and I meet with that, and I talk with that candidate, I'm going through VMS Sync. I'm going through our search engine to be able to find those jobs. I'm getting them connected to 3 or 4 opportunities. And from there, I'm actually being led to growth. So you got to have a simple and clear communication strategy that everyone in the organization can get on board with. You've got to enable them with the technology to be able to go execute on that. For us, those are our matching platforms, and that's VMS Sync is a part of that equation right there. And then the last element is you've got to be able to create some sort of lead measure that's some sort of analytics, something that you can measure, that over time you can see that the people who are great at that also are great at success. Because executives are great at thinking up great ideas in boardrooms and coming up with great taglines for it. But if people on the ground, if they're listening to you and it's not leading to success, long term, that thing is just going to fall flat. And so will your next message that you try and roll out. So again, simple and clear message, technology enablement around that message, and the way to measure and reward performance is the third.
That last bit is huge. The communication piece that you both already touched on, absolutely. But being able to measure and reward that and make sure it aligns with your recruiter's actual success makes a lot of sense. When thinking about the candidate first mentality, it takes me back to another piece of the grid survey results, where, like I mentioned, 90% of respondents were indicated that they really wished finding jobs were easier with staffing firms. Over half of them had given up on a search as the process took too long. And then finally, those that had tried working via an online platform said that it was actually far easier than working directly with a staffing firm, which is pretty wild when you think about it, right? They're saying it is much easier to work with an online staffing firm, but we would still prefer to work with a recruiter online platform, excuse me, but we would still prefer to work with a staffing firm and work with a recruiter. So it seems like a huge opportunity for us, right? How do we need to respond to this? And what's your plan, if you have one, if the business has one, to respond to this? Larry, I'll pass it to you first.
I guess I can start. What I loved, Art had a talk at Bullhorn Engage, and it was actually fascinating. So the same day last year, Art had this conversation at Bullhorn Engage about what he called the move to the middle, where you see big staffing is moving towards technology enablement, and then digital staffing platforms like the Upworks of the world are moving towards traditional staffing. It's this like big race. And in Art's version, he's talking about some of the advantages that we have in staffing. The same day, the CEO of Upwork gave an almost identical talk in their earnings call and was talking about how they actually have the edge in the race in the middle because of technology enablement. For me, I think that you've got to lean in and listen to the stuff that Art was saying, but I'm kind of on his side of the fence on this one, because I do think that if you can enable your customers and enable your candidates with the same ease of search and rec or candidate identification, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to take away the flashy user experience lure that some of those other technologies have. And they're great technologies, by the way. If you don't believe it, then you should download one of the hiring manager accounts and start playing around with it and go do your own searches yourself. There's some real genius into how they open up hiring managers' eyes to the candidate marketplace. And so for us, we're investing in not only public platforms to allow our customers to search through our candidates, but also additional ways that we're leveraging things like machine learning and collaboration tools to be able to create an ecosystem that for staffing is more similar to like the real estate market, where you have, your customers have access to the candidates and they can see what candidates you're working with, and your candidates have access to your jobs. And that recruiter and account manager is really playing more of a broker role, more of a facilitator role. And if you can do that effectively, it's my belief that you can actually beat the technology platforms to the middle. Because it's much harder to stand up an organization of like 2,500 or 3,000 recruiters and account managers than it is to be able to build, a search engine for your own for your own database, and leverage with technology partners like Bullhorn to be able to have that work properly. But I do think that we have to adopt that model where, and healthcare has always had this. I'm sure Amy's got some great insights in this. It's like beat them to the middle by giving better access to your customers and your candidates around what the respective inventory looks like. And that's where then again, the recruiter experience can reign supreme, and we can help facilitate all of those.
Agree. This race to the middle is an interesting one. I tend to agree with you, Larry, but I am certainly interested, Amy, to hear what you have to add here from a healthcare perspective.
Yeah, and I think, as much as we've tried in the healthcare, I think the one thing we've done for years is not be transparent in posting. We're the only ones that have this job. Let's hide where it is. Let's hide the salary. That has been it for years. And I think it's just you're not able to do that anymore. If you want to be a part of any of these sites to post to and get your word out, you have to be transparent. Who's going to search for a job that has no salary on it? Who's going to search for a job that you don't quite have the location of it? And do I want to go there? And so I do think that's a big change for healthcare. For years in staffing and healthcare, we've hidden that. And I think some of our partners have pushed us. They've given us that information to say, you have to be more transparent. This is how you're losing people. So I think that's been a big change for healthcare as far as exposing a little bit more. And we've got competing brands internally, and they try to hide stuff. And you just wind up competing. It really comes down to, though, the experience the candidate has with us in the relationship and the ease of working with us. And you have to release that. You know, if you're going to go work with somebody else at the same exact job, then we deserve to lose it. We didn't put the right foot forward. We didn't make it easy for the candidate. We didn't make that relationship. I think, you know, from the site standpoint, you got to give them, like we talked about, various tools. Same thing with various avenues in. Like, if you just want to give me your name and your phone number, I guess that's all I'm going to get, and that's okay. We need to be okay with that and stop requiring. I think, you know, even again, probably more so healthcare. Can you give me these 10 things? Otherwise, I don't want to call you. We've tried to give that access in again to drive them more to our sites. Anything we're sending out is still driving them back to our main site, but you've got to give them options. Like, if this is all you want to give me right now, you have to be okay with that. And if somebody's willing to sit down and do everything, and it's just interesting to look at the data, if you get them and you attract them and they register, 80% of the time they're finishing stuff. If I lose them and they come back, we're looking at 50, 60% because I've lost their attention. And so, again, if you can keep them on your site and make it simple and easy, get them in the door. Otherwise, the drop-off rate is significant.
So true. I had a customer a few months ago say that they had the CIO. She said they went through and did all this work on the onboarding piece and had taken it from like 12 minutes to 4 minutes, I think. It was something super drastic, single digit. And she had her 18 or 19-year-old daughter just test drive it just to see. And she was halfway through and was just like, Mom, this is so long. Like, who has time for this? And it's wild to think these are up and comers, right?
Yeah.
And we're working with internally on getting some more research around this, because the Gen Z and other folks are really, their drop-off rate is going to be even more significant. And so how can we work with what we're getting and making it still a meaningful process for them as they decide to engage with you? Such a good point.
And it's a balance. Like, you're right. I want to get the information quick from you so I don't lose them, because we've had folks all over testing some of our new sites the same way. This is too long. You're asking too much. But also, as a healthcare worker, I know at some point you're coming back to ask me for all my malpractice information, all my licenses. You know, there is a balance there that, how do I attract you without losing you? But you and I both know at some point I got to come get this information from you. How do you balance that at the right time to get that from them?
Fair enough. Okay, we're coming up at the hour. I will say I've noticed that we have some great questions in here. So Jan, shameless plug for a potential webinar or something to follow up if we can get Amy and Larry on air to agree so we can dive into some of these questions. But in the meantime, with just a few minutes left, what is one free piece of advice you would give someone who's really just considering their candidate and client journey using automation? Wild card.
Well, one piece of advice. Automate your internal systems first, and your people will lead you to know where you should focus the majority of your other efforts. Like, if you're spending all this time automating around the customer and around the candidate, but you forget that you've got to automate your internal systems first, the reminder tools that your recruiters get, the tools that your recruiters can use to be able to schedule meetings internally, the tools, your collaboration tools, automating their training and onboarding process, right? That is something that is, you know, we coach customers on so much, and, you know, I'm sure it is this way at a lot of companies. You know, how are you systematic about the way that you hire new employees, train new employees, onboard new employees, keep them on their developmental program, do things like proper leadership reviews and making sure that they're feeling supported? Like, you can very, very easily, just by spending too much time capital in one area, tell your internal employees that the candidates and the customers are more important than they are, if you haven't already done the legwork of automating their experience with the recruiter. You know, there's a phrase floating around at Insight Global called RX, right? You know, everyone knows like CX, the client experience, or the candidate experience. The recruiter experience is the single most important thing to your success as a staffing company. So I'd start there. But if you do that, then you can go really have some fun with your candidates and your customers.
Well, thank you, Larry. You actually answered Jennifer Cousins' question here too on, do you find the data helps drive adoption? And a clear yes. And starting internally will help you get the data you need to drive that adoption. Okay, Amy, you're in the hot seat.
Yeah,
One free piece of advice.
Yeah, I think to balance that out for me, again, lessons learned, don't assume you know what your customers want. If you go build something and find out they're not using it, it's the worst thing you could have invested time in. Go and understand if it's, IT, or if it's staffing, healthcare staffing, nursing, physicians, understand what they want to make their experience better. I think we tend to run and we assume we know what they want and the access they want and the interaction they want with us. And we go and build it only to find out it's not used. So first and foremost, go figure out what your customers want from you before you take off on kind of that digital journey. It's expensive. Get as close to right as you can, and then learn quick and fail fast. Like you're going to learn very fast, but keep touching your customers and hearing from them quickly so that you can adjust. It's okay to put something out in a first draft and it doesn't work, but listen to your clients and your customers to fix it and make adjustments and continue to evolve.
That's such sound advice and a mantra of ours here at Bullhorn, no doubt. So appreciate, behind the scenes when you give us the opportunity to pick your brains and learn more about what needs are. Appreciate you today just joining this panel, and thank you to everyone who stayed on, and so many of you with such great questions. So we will certainly circle back if given the opportunity to cover some more of those. And thank you to Jan and to the whole crew at World Staffing Summit. This has been a great experience, and looking forward to learning more throughout the week.
Thank you, Amy and Kendra, and to all of our partners over at Bullhorn. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate that you were able to join us.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Absolutely, no problem. And yeah, for the rest of the audience, stick around. We'll have a short break, and then we have a couple cool more sessions coming up. So yeah, stick around, and I'll see you later.
All right.
See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.